Ron Perry is absent, and so is John Leshever. So we do have a quorum, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 original members, so we're all set. We don't need to appoint any alternates. Okay, first up is the application number 14-37 of Robin Messier Pearson Esquire for K&K Developers, Inc., applicant Infinity 4 LLC owner for a zone change from I-1 to I-1 and pad on the property located at 34 Hot Meadow Street, map E18, block 117, lot 001, zone I-1.
I try to be every single day, believe me. Hi there, I'm Chris Ferrero, I'm with Fuss & O'Neill. We're here representing K&K Homes and Garden Homes as the developer of one of the phases of this master plan. Also here in attendance is Bill Krosky Architects. We're going to talk quite a bit probably about architecture today, materials, things like that. Robin Pearson, who is playing me on TV, I guess, today, and she'll be probably speaking toward the end. Today, obviously, we have a pad application, as you know, that's going through the process. And we're stopping at all of Simsbury's referral agencies, and you folks were actually kind enough to have a joint commission meeting with the zoning commission about a month ago to hear our sort of preliminary application. And at that meeting, I think it was somewhat unanimous that it was suggested that based on that presentation that we move forward with some of the more detail, and we have, and now we're here as part of that process. So you've seen probably some of this already. I'm not going to maybe go through all of it, but again, we have a pad application. It's on about 60 acres of land at the southern, along Hot Meadow Street at the southern part of town. This is the Avon and Simsbury border. The existing conditions of that site, you probably know, are pretty much you have a CLMP property in the middle. That's a leased property. The landowner owns both of these parcels currently. The property is comprised of 2 pieces of land, 2 separate parcels, so you have one to the south and you have one to the north. The only wetlands on the property is basically a drainage ditch right here that is frankly fed by a CLMP easement across a piece of this land that drains all of the parking lots and whatnot of the CLMP property. So the pad zone encourages proposals of mixed use and other attractive, innovative developments in certain non-residential areas of town. And the pad zones are created specifically because of the flexibility that it offers and that it may offer to developers that want to come in and do something maybe a little bit more creative than the underlying zone would normally allow. The prime developer is Garden Homes of the apartments. They've been around for a long, long time, since about 1955. They've developed over 40,000 units of rental housing and an additional 40,000 units of for-sale condominium and single-family homes. They're not strangers to Connecticut. They have a number of sizable projects in Connecticut. The design team is obviously Fuss & O'Neill, doing sort of planning, landscape architecture, engineering, traffic, environmental, all of this kind of thing. Bill Krosky Architects, will be showing you some architecture. RKG Associates was hired. I won't show much of their information to you today. If you're interested, we can see it and talk about it. But they were hired to look at the feasibility of absorption of these units, whether Simsbury can build these and then lease these, as well as build and lease the commercial or mixed-use components. And then they prepared, in addition, a fiscal impact analysis in terms of the tax base that would be generated as a result of these developments. Mike Klein, again, no stranger to Simsbury. Environmental Planning Services is taking care of all of our wetlands and biological needs. Some examples of what Garden Homes has done. When I started kind of getting into the website and getting into this massive portfolio of housing, one of the things that struck me was they have built everything from, urban, highly dense, to down to sort of, single-story rural and everything in between. So this is just 2 pages of a couple, 4 shots per page of the type of work, the varied work that Garden Homes does. Clearly not a cookie cutter fits every solution. They tailor their needs to each individual site and each individual market. Again, some of the higher density product, some of the lower density product. And one thing also that I noticed, and maybe I'd like you to notice too, is how well these sites are maintained. They're maintained impeccably by Garden Homes. Garden Homes is not in the business of flipping property. They approve, they build, they own, they manage. So the Plan of Conservation and Development talks about two different options for this property. The first option is as zoned, industrial office. The second option is called the alternative strategy, which lays out a number of tenets that have to be met in order to achieve that application. And one of those is basically mixed use. This entire neighborhood is a mixed-use neighborhood. You've got employment centers on either side of the site. I'm sorry, here's the site. Employment centers either side of the site. You have retail. You have multifamily and single-family residential to the west of Hop Meadow Street. You have the Nod Brook Wildlife Sanctuary to the down here, and you have one of the most important parts of this development to us is the bike lane, the bike trail. And that bike trail abuts our site, and we feel it's a sort of a prime consideration with respect to the attractiveness of this development to attract people that really want to use the bike and operate that mobility alternative into downtown Simsbury, Weetog, downtown Avon, and then beyond. So this project wasn't completed in a vacuum. We've read and actually prepared some of the previous reports for the town of Simsbury. Clearly, you're going to hear a lot about the POCD tonight and the sort of conformance with that. But Fuss O'Neill also did the Route 10 corridor study, which basically, a couple of major tenets out of that relate to this particular site is the ability to maintain a two-lane character of Hop Meadow Street. And we also participated in the previous River Oaks application. Now, when looking at the previous River Oaks application relative to this application, we are almost half of the density of the square footage of the pavement, et cetera, that River Oaks was. So just to give you a sense of scale in terms of what we're looking at, that's where we are at this point. So the fundamental tenets of the design approach are really not borne by us. They're borne by your Plan of Conservation and Development. I'm not going to read all of these, but we really stayed very true to all of these things as part of the master planning and the design process, particularly with respect to a couple of things. One is views. You'll see some things about views in a minute. And the second thing is the preservation of open space and how that open space is arranged. And then lastly, as I mentioned, the two-lane character and the preservation of that character along Hop Meadow Street. Again, not going to read all this, but the Plan of Conservation is very clear about desirable performance objectives with respect to this alternative. So this is an alternative strategy. It is not the underlying zone. If it was the underlying zone, we could build a heck of a lot of office space, bring those parking lots and buildings to within 40 feet of the property lines, including the property line at Hop Meadow Street, and build them 40 feet high. So the POCD under this alternative strategy is clearly intending not to allow that to happen with the development of this parcel. So I started to talk about views, and I want to spend a couple of minutes on views. There are some iconic view sheds on Hop Meadow Street to the Talcott Ridge and to the Hugh Blind Tower. And one of the important tenets of the Plan of Conservation and Development is to preserve a continuous view of the ridge line where possible, and to create terminal views. In other words, areas where buildings open up and you actually have somewhat unobstructed views all the way back to that full mountain range. So we cut cross sections, and these cross sections went from Hop Meadow Street all the way to the top of the Talcott Mountain Range, and that's what these basically are. This is a USGS map. These A, B, C, and Ds are where these cross sections are cut. That's the Talcott Range. This is Hop Meadow Street. We wanted to get a sense of, at driver's eye level, how far back do buildings need to be placed and how high can they be and still maintain a view to that ridge line. And these are too small. I understand you can't see them, but you'll see something. You'll see an enlargement graphic a little later when we start talking about architecture, roof pitches, and overall building heights. What this analysis translated to was the beginnings of, and these are just recommendations, and at this point they are approximations, as to for a one-story, a two-story, and a three-story building, where would those buildings, in a sense, have to be located in order to be able to maintain that view? Again, a continuous view to the ridge line. Clearly, if you loaded up this entire frontage right on that line with one-story buildings, you would see the ridge line, but not much of anything else. So POCD, and we agree, also recommends terminal views, where particularly at these intersections from Blue Sky and Old Meadow Plain Road, at these intersections, the ability to see right through the site, unobstructed views through the site to that mountain range. It's that range in this area that to some extent gives Simsbury a sense of place and as a gateway coming into town. Some of these views are pretty dramatic. I will say, however, that there is existing vegetation that currently blocks those views. So the CLMP property, which, 20 years ago, somebody probably made them plant pine trees all over the place in order to block the view of that office building. Well, those pine trees are now 60 feet high, and those pine trees and that vegetation completely obstruct the view of the range anyway. There's an existing patch of mature vegetation that covers the wetland area that I described before. Therefore, obviously, there's no views within that area. The fact that it is wetlands means that we're not going to be removing those trees, and so there are certain places here where we will not be able to either maintain or enhance the views that, frankly, aren't there today. I did this at the informal, so I'll go through it kind of quickly. But what this is it's just a drive-by. So that little red arrow, sort of in the key map on the lower left-hand corner, you're going to see that little red arrow move up and down Hot Meadow Street. First we're going to go from the north to the south, looking at the site. Then we're just going to double back and come back north. And it's just to give you a sense of where you can and where you cannot see some of these views. So here, for example, looking this way, you really can't see, and this is winter, by the way, it's spring, early spring, I think I did this. You can't see through the vegetation to the tops of the mountains. Even as you move farther to the north, those mountains aren't available from a viewshed perspective yet. CLMP's vegetation I mentioned has a substantive impact. You can start to see it a little bit, but it's not until you start to get past that CLMP property that you start to see that beautiful ridgeline. That's the wetland that we were referring to before. And I'd like to point out, although it's really hard to see on this graphic, that is the adjacent office building, and it's a 2.5 to 3-story building. And you can still easily see the ridgetop because that office building is set so far back in the site. That's an important consideration when we start talking about how we laid out this site. Again, more views somewhat obstructed by that wetlands vegetation system we talked about. That's better, Hiram, thanks. Continuing to move. Now, this is a 2 to 3-story office building, again, adjacent to the site, but it's the building much closer. The one I just pointed out was way back there. So even with that, you can still begin to, if there wasn't the vegetation in the background, still see at least that ridge line. Turning around, and this is probably one of the more iconic views, and interestingly enough, it's pretty close to where we've set our entrance drive and where we've purposely set up this terminal view, one of the number of terminal views. Rolling back through the CLMP site. Existing scrub vegetation, which if removed would help in a number of cases. And back out. So that viewshed system and the system of open space really was how our development pattern kind of emerged here. So the viewshed analysis sort of told us that if we can begin to look at setting buildings back, if we can begin to look at putting the smaller one-story buildings in the front of the site and the taller buildings in the back where the viewshed doesn't matter as much, that might be a development pattern that would work. So we've began to establish a series of open space systems. The primary open space system is, as the POCD recommends, a green space of between 150 and 200 feet between Hot Meadow Street and the nearest piece of pavement or building. That system connects into these sort of central open space systems, and those central open space systems become part of the terminal view sheds associated with what the POCD is recommending at both of these intersections. Now, beyond that, this is a mixed-use project, and the pad zone requires a mixed-use project. As such, I'll just illustrate some of these components. The Garden Homes site, the K&K site, the site that will be built immediately if successfully approved, is a 14-acre piece of land shown in the brown, and that's at the rear of the, obviously at the rear of the property. The remainder of the site would be developed in the future predicated on developer interest, so on and so forth, but those areas are in purple, and they're comprised of a small site in this area here, and this, a site here. These would be two-story buildings, again, because I mentioned you don't have the view to the mountains anyway. So there are two-story buildings here, one-story buildings here, and then a combination of one-story buildings along, closest to Hot Meadow Street, and two-story buildings in the back on that final parcel. This entire piece would be left alone for the time being, and it would be set up for future development upon development interest. I mentioned the bike trail already. This is an important component of what we're talking about. We think there's a real hook with respect to the residential and the mixed-use characters, and the bike trail begins to connect all of these mixed uses in the neighborhood as well as to the town center. So hopefully people will get on their bike and they'll ride to the restaurants in Simsbury and then go home rather than bringing their car into town. And I think that's a real viable opportunity for the town. So what happens when, if this project is approved? Well, what will happen immediately is that Garden Homes, K&K, will come in and they will build 181 units of housing in this site here. That site's about a 14 to 15 acre site. They will own the access way that attaches to Hot Meadow Street. They will subsequently grant rights of access to the adjacent parcels, but by the nature of the ownership of that right-of-way, this is basically going to be a 3-lot subdivision, the application of which we would supply to you if we go forward with the site plan application part of it. As I mentioned, the entire rest of the property is pretty much going to stay in single ownership. I would suspect at some point in time, development on this piece of land will necessitate or have a subdivision line that further subdivides out those two things. So a little bit of the breakdown of each of these parcels. 1A, which is in the upper left-hand corner, I mentioned that's mixed use. That's 2 stories. It's about 51,000 square feet total for both floors. 1B is the Garden Homes site. That is 181 units of housing, and that housing is comprised of 25 townhouse units. And those townhouses, again, because they're smaller, they're located closer to Hot Meadow Street. They're 2-story, 2.5-story buildings. And the remainder, 156 units, would be primarily 1-bedroom apartments and about 20% 2-bedroom apartments. Parking for all of this, let me first say, the existing CLMP site, the data that I'm presenting to you doesn't include any of this, so when I talk about parking and these kind of things, CLMP is what it is, and it's going to stay that way. This is the parcel, we're calling this parcel 2. It's the remainder of the 60 acres, about 34 acres, and that's going to include about total 91,000 square feet. We've got plus or minus 39 to 40,000 square feet, single-story building here, and possibly smaller single and 2-story buildings in this location. So the Garden Home site, again, 181 apartment units. It'll have clubhouses, open spaces, swimming pools, amenities, both passive and active recreations, much of which I'll get into in a minute. So again, the plan of conservation development, some of those desirable performance objectives have to do with open space, and we were fairly careful in terms of how we located open space, and the open space in this plan serves multiple functions. So there's passive open spaces, such as the Hot Meadow Green that we talked about. That's 150 to 200 feet. And then there's more active open spaces, and these active open spaces contain active amenities specifically for the residents, swimming pools, clubhouses, and the like. There are passive open spaces, and the passive open spaces are designed to do a couple of primary things. One, break up the parking fields so that we don't have a sea of parking in any one location, and B, they're part of our stormwater management system in terms of infiltration. The soils out here are fantastic soils for infiltrating. So the idea from a green infrastructure standpoint is basically to begin looking at diverting pavement runoff into these open spaces to maximize the infiltration capabilities. This is an enlargement of the residential component, and so you can start to see that's the primary open space. And I'd like to point out how this is sort of laid out. It's sort of the grid pattern. When you come in the entranceway, you'll have basically a decision point here in terms of going to the commercial components. Everything is interconnected across the whole site. So we only need 3 curb cuts on Hot Meadow Street, 2 of which are primary here and at the northern end, and 1 of which is, quite frankly, secondary and probably going to be used for service only. At some point in time, that, upon full build-out, that intersection becomes a signalized intersection. And however, that signalized intersection doesn't have all the warrants that it needs just based on the build-out of the housing component. So the block and grid pattern as you get in here is, again, try to locate the smaller buildings in a block form, try to get parking to the rear of these buildings, maximize parking on the streets, which again reduces the big surface lots, and set up a block and grid system whereby the buildings are floating to some extent in open space. So we tried pretty hard to have open space on one side, open space on the opposite side of these things. All of this connects basically right there to the bicycle trail. Now, in an effort to reduce pavement, for example, we decided that we'll take about 13% of the net parking required for the residential use and set it in a deferred status. So we're pretty sure we're not going to need it, and that, I think it was 47 spaces would end up, again, be in reserve. It would be contribution to the green space. The green space and open space calculations do not include that. And fundamentally, we have an open space system that's close to 39 acres, almost 50%, more than 50% of the site. I'd like to have Bill Krosky come up and maybe say a few words about some of the architectural components.
Let me ask you a question, just out of curiosity. If you take 1A and you say mixed use, what are you anticipating? The components of
In terms of what would be the stores that move into that?
Mixed use.
Our market folks have basically told us, they analyze retail leakage, meaning money that Simsbury residents are spending out of town. And some of the things they've come up with are furniture, hardware, services such as laundromats, things of that nature. That's what they're thinking about now.
Thanks, Chris. Good evening, everybody. I'm Bill Krosky from Krosky Architects, and I'm in charge of designing the buildings for this project. So the first building we're showing here is the smallest of the 3 residential building types, and it is comprised of the townhouse units, 2.5-story building that's got a little bit of variety and different unit types to it. So one of the things we tried to do for this project on all 3 of our buildings is capture traditional New England character by using things such as pitched roofs, residential clapboard siding, double hung windows, and things that are traditional to New England's architecture. Also, clustering the units and designing the buildings in an aesthetically appealing form that has a nice massing and balance to it. This particular building is kind of an asymmetrical but balanced building design. You'll see some others in the next 2 that we show. And also trying to get some variety and play in the facades with some shadow lines and ins and outs to the building that help reduce the visual scale of the building. So this building, again, is the townhouse building. We're showing a typical unit on the lower left here, which is has a garage and entrance at the main level, entrance foyer. Open kitchen, living, dining room area, stair to the upstairs with 2 bedrooms and a bath, and then in the roof shape we've got a master bedroom suite with its own bathroom and walk-in closet, and then we have another unit which you see over on the left, which is an accessible townhouse, which has a bedroom and bathroom on the first floor, and then 2 bedrooms on the second floor.
Now, the units will be units of 4?
We have, I think, one building that's 4, several that are 5, and one that's 6 in terms of the clusters. This is the middle-sized building, which is a 2-story building. This has, all the units are flats, and you can see in the plan there are 6 units on this level, 3 on each side. We have an entrance point on either side into a stairwell and lobby and a common hallway. The first floor of this building, we've got individual entrances that lead into those ground floor units because we want to try to create a neighborhood feel to the development where all the ground floor units have direct entrances and have front porches, and so that the neighborhood feels friendly and walkable, and then we're using traditional materials and massing and features of New England architecture. We've also got some cultured stone on the base here. We'll be using vinyl siding and trim for the siding and the trim, and then asphalt, architectural grade asphalt shingles for the roofs. And this is the larger building that occurs at the rear of the site. It's a 3-story building. Again, all the units are flats, and we have 10 units per floor. We have a stairwell at each end, elevator in the middle, entrance from both sides into that common space. But again, on this building, all of the ground floor units have individual porches and entrances. The upper floor units have porches that are above those individual unit entries, so they have outdoor space as well. And this building has a little variation that occurs on one end of the building, depending upon, if you remember the site plan and how the buildings are adjacent to each other. In some cases, we have the decks on the end. In other cases, we have along the long face of the building.
Is the attic space used somehow?
No, it isn't. So this is, we're envisioning this being framed with trusses. For simplicity of construction and ease of construction, and the ability to have the unit layout work and where the units stack vertically, so that all our structure and bathrooms and so forth are laid out logically and efficiently. So that's really those are the 3 building types that we have.
And there's 4 of these in the back of the property.
Yes. Next slide.
And
Okay.
parking for these, for this group?
For which group?
The last one we talked about, the
Larger one.
3 stories.
The 3 stories, there's 4 of those buildings, and the parking is split between on-street diagonal parking, and then a parking lot in the back that's separated by that open space.
Are we going to get to the site plan in a minute? 'Cause we can
Okay,
go back
okay.
to that. So we'll get to the site plan again, we can point that out. We'll also have a small community building clubhouse that sits on the green, little 1-story building that's kind of the jewel of the project. And then we've shown a character image for what the 1-story commercial that would be built at a later date would be out at the street line. Chris, you want to do this part? Or?
And that is not part of this, that commercial is not part of what we're looking at today?
Well, what we're approving today is an entire master plan, a pad site, a pad zone application. The pad zone includes things such as the mixed-use components that would be built in the future.
But are we to comment on the design of that building right there?
Well, you can, but it probably wouldn't make any difference. I haven't gotten to my part of the speech where, basically, this will be a situation where I think what Bill's suggesting is, from a character standpoint, this is maybe the kind of architecture that,
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
and in the future, right, you would
But the other three are,
Yes.
that's what you're gonna do.
That's what we're doing,
Right.
yes, all the housing. Yeah.
So we did, in this diagram, we just wanted to show how the height is diminished at the front of the site. Here, the commercial building is a one-story, and then the buildings get a little bigger as you go towards the back. You can see the relative scale here in this diagram at the bottom, and the green line shows the view line from.
Yeah, that green line actually, these are the location of the buildings as placed in the site plan. And at that point there, this is that 150 to 200 feet of open space along Hot Meadow Street. This is a one-story commercial building, two to 2.5-story townhouse, 2-story rental, 3-story rental with pitched roofs. Now what this green bar is, this sort of ascending or descending green bar, is the top part of that bar is basically where you see just the ridge line. The bottom part of that bar is where you see about 200 feet vertically of that ridge line. So obviously, this is just for our site. You carry this, if you recall those sections, they go all the way to this Falcon mountain. Yeah, it spans, keeps going up and up and up and up. That sort of view line. That'll get wider and wider and wider until you've got 200 feet of clear view. So, I mean, the placement and the scale of these buildings are very carefully worked out with respect to the ability to maintain views to that ridge line.
I just want to go back and cover one point on the townhouses that we did. In this case, there are rooms in the case of this upper floor unit, or upper floor room, it is built within the roof structure. So it does have dormers to bring the height down. You can see the eave line here that occurs at the top of the second floor. So we've tried to do that, particularly in the townhouses at the front of the site, where we have a little more flexibility in terms of the building construction and design when we don't have to worry about communicating horizontal spaces such as common hallways and so forth. So we have a little more flexibility with this building type as opposed to the bigger buildings. So just wanted to point that out.
From Route 10 to the back of the property to the bike path, how much does it drop?
Well, okay, so it drops, it's almost dead flat, except from Hot Meadow Street, it drops down pretty quick, about 6 to 8 feet. And then it drops down a little further as you get, perfect. So as you get to this wetland, it drops a little bit, but when I set the elevation of those structures, I basically said, well, a good part of this is going to be filled in anyway, that's sort of like a swale, but fundamentally, the site is almost dead flat, but it dropped between here and here about 8 feet.
Okay.
And the total site's about 900 to 1,000 feet in depth total.
So to answer your question about parking, the four bigger buildings are these two, and we have parking along the back. We have parking over here. We have parking on the street in front of both of those buildings. So it's really spread out pretty evenly around the site.
While you have that up, Chris, I have a couple of questions and comments. What exactly is going to happen with the CLMP buildings and landscaping and so on? Is that going to remain the same, exactly the same?
I would assume so,
All right.
at least in the short term.
My concern is when your first phase is completed and folks are living there, at the east end, or actually from the middle of the property right to the bike path, you're overlooking the industrial part of CLNP. Considering what those folks will look at, it seems to me we have to address some kind of situation there that hides or screens that area. Also, we're going to have, when we have a major issue, a major storm, we're going to have significantly more vehicles, trucks, equipment, et cetera, not only in the yard there, but on the street. And I think we need to address that in some fashion.
Address some of it.
Pardon?
The issue of emergencies is you're right. I mean, you're going to have increased vehicles. This CLMP driveway has a right to pass easement for these properties to the south. So we're definitely using the CLMP driveway as part of our access, sort of integrated access management system. You'll notice basically a row of trees right there. That is supposed to be that's our undesigned, but will be either pure buffer or it'll be mainly large street trees with some kind of understory. So if you notice how these buildings are oriented, on this side, most of them are oriented with the short side toward CLMP. Only that building, and half of that building, because it's a double-loaded corridor, got units on one side, units on the other side. So half of that building is affected by that, and what we're hoping is that the canopies of those trees basically get to the point where, they will never probably completely obscure that view, but it'll certainly help.
Well, it's a concern, and as we go forward with the detail of this, once the PAD is approved,
Yeah.
I think we need to, work on that a little bit. The other, and this is just a question about procedure. You're applying for a PAD for the entire property,
Correct.
and yet most of the early part of the program is only the southern part of the property. Are we approving the entire PAD as presented, or are we approving the first phase?
Hiram can certainly chime in. I think what we're approving here is you're approving the entire pad zone that is overlaid on this entire parcel. You're approving the character, in particular, of the housing components, because we know that's what's going to come. With respect to whatever comes in the future, the sort of intent of the pad zone is that even though you're doing this in phases, it to some extent locks in a future character and a future scale. So any developer, for example, that came in and wanted to develop that piece of land in next year, and they had 3-story buildings right on Hot Meadow Street, and they ignored the pad zone master plan that was approved, they'd have to go through the entire rezoning process again. Versus if a development entity came in and proposed, let's say, a building there or a building there, but its parking layout was in general conformance, the scale was in general conformance, the intent of what this master plan set out from a scale and character standpoint were in conformance with what that developer proposed, then he would not have to change the zone. He would have to come to you for a site plan as part of a site plan application process. And it's contingent upon the boards and commissions in Simsbury, and including the zoning commission, to make the determination as to how much that future development application conforms with the character and the scale that's been set out in the overall master plan approval.
So can I just, along John's lines, clarify that? So if it gets approved to a pad, and in 5 years, somebody comes back and takes that right side of parcel 2 and says, I want to build a 30,000 square foot big box store there, it would still have to come back through approvals before it could proceed, right? They don't have, they still have to come get approval from us in zoning.
This is the master plan approval for the rezone, essentially. And the application for the site plan for each of those other units that you haven't seen yet, that would have to come back to you, zoning commission, for site plan approval. Correct.
But the small number of shops in front of this we're working on to approve, right?
I'm sorry?
Just
The,
1B, right? Just parcel 1B.
Well, you're approving the character and the scale and the basic layout.
But not the, go ahead, I'm sorry.
You're approving basic character, scale, layout, open space systems, general
Yes.
circulation systems of the entire piece. And you're getting, quite frankly, a sneak preview in a little bit more detail, because you're going to see this very soon. If we're successful with the pad, you'll see this in actual site plan format. So you will get another shot, if you will, at at the specifics of this. Our next step would be to fully engineer this and fully architect this, and then come before you again and talk about the
Okay.
specifics of materials and things of that nature.
It's also going to need a subdivision. The planning commission would get involved with subdivision. Should the PAD go forward and that be approved, then they would go for subdivision and then back to second.
Okay. Don't want to spend a lot of time about traffic and parking, but we're pretty comfortable with 1.78 parking spaces per residential unit. And from the standpoint of mixed use and sharing parking, we believe that 4 spaces per 1,000 on the commercial and mixed use is something that would fly in a shared situation. Again, depending on the use that comes in, I could see that if a restaurant, for example, went in, that parking ratio might need to be exceeded. If an office, sort of second-story office went in and that could share parking with either residential units or restaurants, then maybe you'd have a reduction in that. So we tried to use an average of about 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet for the commercial components. I've already sort of testified, we are trying very, very hard to break up the parking from the standpoint of maximizing on-street parking and trying to get these parking lots in the backs of basically the backs along the CLMP piece, along the adjacent office piece, and sort of out of the residential core of the blocking grid of the residential component. Similarly, on all the other parcels, we're not parking substantive parking spaces between the building facades and Hot Meadow Street. We're putting it off to the side, or we're utilizing, again, on-street or in the rear parking facilities to service those mixed-use buildings.
One other important point too, along the questions that Tony and John asked, is that the density that you're seeing in this master development plan is locked in, should the PAD be approved. So the density is locked in. Now, whether the building changes slight arrangement or whatever would be something that you would see at the site plan stage. So this is a master development plan concept with things like the amount of impervious area, the amount of open space, and the density locked in at that point.
Again, not going to go through all of this stuff, but the bottom line is we have done a full traffic analysis, the full reports in the appendix. Character of Hot Meadow Street's a key component of that, and I think we've achieved that. So the desirable performance objectives, I've talked quite a bit about most of these already. Preserving the vistas and views, certainly. The character and the integrated nature of the mixed open space program. The variety of housing options between a townhouse and many different townhouse styles, and then the 2 and the 3 story multifamily components. The mix of uses, which is again a tenet of the POCD, and mix of building sizes. I think we've been there with the smaller buildings in the front to preserve sort of the view sheds. And again, all of this ties right into that wonderful bike lane that I think is going to be such a tremendous asset to whoever lives in this community. I mean, we're going to propose and probably inevitably build bike storage facilities. I mean, I think that's how popular this is going to be for bicycle enthusiasts. Again, continuing with the performance objectives, access management is a high priority in the POCD, and that has to do with how many curb cuts on Hot Meadow Street and how can we efficiently manage our own traffic volume internally with a connected system. So at some point in time, when future development occurs on the additional parcels, that connectivity as part of the master plan is going to need to be incorporated into that site plan approval process. And that system being in place, we basically have 2 new primary entrances in all of that Hot Meadow Street frontage, with 1 secondary entrance, and utilizing CLMP's existing driveway as the 3rd primary entrance, but certainly not a new one.
There's one question that came up at one of the other presentations, was the access way behind the Northeast Utilities building at some point. And I know you perhaps can't speak for the current owner, but is there some sort of indication that you can give as to whether you think that would be able to be done in the future in terms of connecting the north side site with the south side?
Yeah, physically, absolutely. And the way we addressed that question was, CLMP is going to be interested in security of that yard. Mm-hmm. So at some point in time, it would be a negotiation with the landowner and his leasee in terms of how we basically create that kind of connectivity and still provide for the operational clarity and security of that facility. And frankly, one of the fire marshal's comments, we've already met with the fire marshal, he's enamored with the idea of actually building this piece right away, because he feels that from a firefighting perspective, having that second means of egress in and out of the site would be very beneficial.
Just a quick, how close to the Avon side are the Avon buildings?
How close, well, there's the Avon town line,
Yes.
so the nearest building is that townhouse, its side faces, basically.
No, I mean on the Avon side.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
There are buildings on the Avon side. How
Oh,
close
I
are those
see, okay, yes,
buildings
yes,
to
yes, I see
this?
what you're saying. Okay, the parking lots, this survey shows that parking lot.
Yes, that's what I was
six-
looking
60
at.
feet, so that's about 60 feet. I'm going to take a guess
About
and say
right
that
there?
building's about another 30 to 40 feet.
That's the office building.
That's the office building.
Okay.
Exactly.
What is the building way down on the bottom? Looks like a building on the map
Offsite?
here.
The offsite, are you looking?
On the Avon side, there's a nice little square with like a porch.
Are you?
Right there,
Right
yes.
here, office.
That's an office?
Yeah, this whole section is basically an office park. Yeah,
East Point Park.
and it's all surrounded by parking.
Okay.
So additional evaluation criteria has a lot to do, obviously, with this commission, but, how we've arranged, I tried to point out how the sort of block and grid pattern and circulation system has been developed. Bill talked about sort of how we arrange the buildings in terms of the scale and character as you move through the site. The system of open spaces and the fact that the buildings are very close to the sidewalks, all of the first floors have their entrance onto the sidewalks, all of the sidewalks abut sort of on-street parking, and then all of that surrounds the primary open space. I mean, that's the sense of enclosure that we're trying to achieve here. And then you get the passive systems on the opposite side, so that these buildings start to feel like they're actually, I hope, floating with open space on either side, active on one side, passive on the other side. I mentioned the scale and how we're trying to achieve that scale and why we're trying to achieve that scale, and it's an increase in scale density. Is somewhat counterintuitive. You'd think you'd put all your density up on Hot Meadow Street. Here, it's exactly the opposite. The denser, the higher buildings, the bigger buildings are farther away from Hot Meadow Street, purposefully. And that concludes, I guess, our part of this, and certainly open it up to.
Compared to the Hartford and how far back the Hartford is from Route 10, this is about the same distance?
No, you're going to have certain buildings that are within.
No, I mean, the big residential buildings.
No, Hartford is way back,
Much further back.
much further back.
Okay.
Much deeper site, different.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the CL&P building gonna look like architecturally as part of this plan? Is it gonna be altered to fit in with the architecture that's being created for the other buildings?
I don't believe so. I believe at this point in time, the CL&P would remain as it is.
So future use of the CLP building, if it was, someone was to come in and say, I want to demo the CLP building and build something new, that would have to come back through for review, and they would be limited to, or they could build anything they want there.
Well, within the PAD, I mean, this is set aside as, that's obviously a industrial facility with office buildings in it. It would be limited to that particular coverage. I would say also, the way this plan is proposed, it's limited to one story. If the use were going to change or the building were going to change, you would see that and make a determination along with the
So
zoning.
the approval that we do for the pad includes CL&P?
It does. That's what they're asking for. Yeah.
Okay. Do you guys have any other comments?
No, I just, we're looking at the big plan here, and anything that's done in the future that will have to come back, here. I mean, I'm pretty satisfied with that.
John, anything?
No,
Anything?
I'm fine right now.
And the part of this process we're in is, if this commission felt it would, we would need a positive referral or negative referral. Would have to have a referral out of this agency that then goes to zoning as part of the overall process.
Yep.
And if everything goes all right, and I hope it does, and you shovel in the ground, when?
10 months.
10 months? Early next year?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I didn't want it to be one of these growing weeds for the next half a
I
century.
don't think it's going to be.
We'd like the Wagner site, just sitting there.
It's like a lot of them. I just have three, I don't know if they're comments or just three concerns that I would like to just give to zoning when they make their decision. The first one is the traffic light at Blue Ridge Drive. Although I understand the whole concept about preserving the view, if you take that iconic view and you throw a traffic light there and cars lined up in all directions, your iconic view is no longer an iconic view. It also, to me, what worries me is that that street is going to become a through street to cut back to Climax and to Bushy Hill instead of going down and turning on 44. So I would just ask zoning to, think about that. I really would rather see the iconic view remain an iconic view and not have a traffic light there. Maybe that angle shifts so that that's not a big through street. Because what's going to happen is people are going to cut right through Blue Ridge, and that residential neighborhood's going to get more traffic. My second recommendation would be to zoning to somehow restrict the size of the retail buildings that could be built. I'm looking at the one in parcel 2, the big one on the right, that somehow there's some sort of restriction to this that says that can only be 10,000 square feet, to avoid that box being a 40,000 square foot Target or something like that. That box to me should be something more along the scale of a Whole Foods, a Trader Joe's, a Fresh Market. I think that's more in scale of Simsbury. So if there's any way we can kind of restrict the ability, to build
Might be able to answer that.
huge buildings.
Yeah. Your Home Depots, your
Home
Super Stop and
Depots,
Shops.
exactly.
These are 120 to 180,000 square feet. Your Trader Joe's, your Whole Foods, 39,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Purposefully been scaled that way.
And that's good. I just want to make sure that's part of the recommendation, that someone can't come in future and tear down CLP and build a 120,000 square foot box on that property just because it's already got the pad. It still would be limited to 30,000 square foot retail or 40,000, whatever the number is, that there's some sort of restriction. And that's basically my third concern too, is that CLP building, so that doesn't become a Home Depot in the future. So I guess we'd be looking for a motion to make a positive referral to zoning for the pad application, given those three comments are taken into consideration. Unless you guys have anything else to add.
Madam Chairman, regarding the application 14-37 of Robin Messier Pearson, Esquire, for K&K Developers Incorporated, applicant, Infinity 4 LLC, owner, for a zone change from I-1 to I-1 and PAD on the property located at 34 Hot Meadow Street, map E18, block 117, lot 001, zone 1-1. I move on behalf of the Design Review Board that we advise the Zoning Commission we find this PAD acceptable with the comments that have been made by this board included in their consideration.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, what's the name of this?
It's like Trex or
Yes.
there's another one, the Hardy board.
Yes.
Hardy, yeah.
Exactly. Use that.
Yeah. Well, they'll have to come back with the details of the materials and stuff, and we can make up a plan.
The
But
roof,
the overall plan is okay. Yeah, right. The overall site plan's okay.
The other thing is, remember last time they were talking about the study to make sure they will be able to rent all this space.
Yeah, and that's in here if you want to
It is
read it.
there?
It
Oh,
is.
okay, okay. That's why I didn't ask, because I
one
thought
of these-
somebody went through this already.
I know.
Yeah.
I actually read skimmed through a lot of it this weekend. But there's like a whole section in here on the housing market stuff, which I find fascinating, because I can't believe rental units here. To me, it's like surprising. Yeah, but it's all here, so you can have some bedtime reading.
It's online.
All right, great. Next up, we have an informal presentation by Thomas J. Daly, PE of Malone and McBroom regarding the Ethel Walker Centennial Center.
Thank you. As you said, good evening. My name is Tom Daly with Mylon and McBroom. Also with me this evening is Lee Sherwood with Omar Architects. And we appreciate the opportunity to come speak with you informally for this application. The school has proceeded in a very thoughtful process. We built the fields about a year ago, and they've been just a wonderful success. And that turned into a dorm, more to make room for this particular building, and the dorm has really, the girls just love it. But here we are with what we believe is the crown jewel of kind of this project, and it's called the Centennial Center. And the Centennial Center, Lee will get more into the space, but it's really, it's a gym, it's a wellness center, it's a central community space for the girls to have a place to go and socialize and be part of an overall campus program. So what we're before you this evening is really the plan that the school has been thoughtfully working. We've been working on this for, I guess, a year now, really going through a process, working with the board, working with the school to really come forward to you, finally, with a plan that the board has endorsed and not fully endorsed. There's a board meeting coming up soon, but a plan we want to present to you. We have met with Hiram and town staff, and we did a review with them. And that was a very positive meeting. We've taken some of Hiram's comments and incorporated them. But as we look at the site plan today, this is Beaverbrook. So this is at the top of the plan is the iconic main building of the Ethel Walker campus. We have Bushy Hill at the top, and then down on this side of the plan is Sand Hill Lane. So directly across the road is the Cobb School. This is where the entrance is today. So if you come in through kind of the back door, it's the way I get into the back of the campus when I come from my house in the morning. I come up Sand Hill. This is the drive here. At that point, you have the ability to go up and around to the main entrance of the campus, which is really right here at the circle. Or you can scoot through the back here and go off to kind of where the dorms and the old gym, which is here. Right now, a really important part of this plan is kind of breaking out the vehicular access through that central core of the campus. This access drive that we're showing on the bottom is really emergency only and service vehicles. We really want to create this great lawn of the pedestrian area as opposed to have cars kind of going in between there. And one part of the dorm is we connected the driveway to the back of Cluett now, so you can actually get through the back of the dorms that way without having to go all the way through the middle of the campus. But the proposal is that we're going to maintain that existing driveway. The Beaverbrook building is here, and there's an existing loading dock that's located at the back of Beaverbrook. That's going to be maintained but reconfigured slightly. You would come in through here. This would be a bus drop-off area located in the middle portion, and then we have some parallel parking. We're really providing a minimal amount of parking because, as you know, with campuses, there's parking to be found on other parts of the campus. Not to mention a lot of the girls live on campus, and a lot of the schools that come and do like swim meets or squash tournaments here, they'll come on a bus. So we designed this, and it would have a cul-de-sac located here, and that cul-de-sac is designed large enough to accommodate both a transit or a large interstate bus, because some of the private schools come on that, but also accommodates the fire trucks. We would then have a bituminous drive located here, which would connect into the existing drive, but as I indicated, that will actually now be cut off for day-to-day traffic. If you want to get through the back here, you're going to have to go around the campus the other way or walk. This will be an emergency access drive, and we worked very early on with your fire marshal, and that was an important part. With this and with the dorm, now the fire department basically has 360-degree access around the entire campus. The building works with the topography, so this entrance here is the entrance here is at the lower level, and the entrance here at the front is at the upper level. And this building, Lee will show you more clearly, really works with the topography and then steps down. We will have a kind of a patio or an entranceway off the back where the girls were able to come through the back of Beaverbrook and into the building. The buildings are interconnected, so you'll be able to go through Beaverbrook and right into the building. One of the things we are doing here is we're kind of formalizing this loading area. It's kind of the back of house of the campus, but part of what we're proposing is actually a screen fence. So we basically 2 gates, so you really won't even be able to see in there from Sand Hill Lane. It's still pretty far away distance, but we see this as a large pedestrian. The girls are going to be able to walk right through here and into this building, so we kind of want to screen it just to increase the experience as you come through there. Right now, we're looking at a wooden screen fence and masonry columns. Not dissimilar to if you walk through this building here, there's actually a wooden screen fence that connects to those buildings that as you scoot through there. The landscaping is generally fairly simplistic, but that's really going with the character of the school. The school really is not a very ornamental landscaping plan. Even if you look on the new dorm, it's really low impact. One thing we did work with Hiram was we have parking in here, and Hiram's request was to beef up that landscaping a little bit so you don't see the headlights. Now, granted, this is up in the air. As you know, this is pretty high up. There's a large bank here. But we did take Hiram's suggestion, and we beefed up that and put in, we just had higher trees, now we put in a low shrub layer, so you really won't see those headlights or those cars parked through there. But once again, we have some large kind of gathering spaces at the 2 main entrances. Really, the building is the star on this project, not the site planning. The site planning is relatively simple. We will have a landscape turnaround here and a large flagpole located there, but generally the site really fits in to here. And as you can see at the back of the building here, as you travel down Bushy Hill, you're virtually not even going to be able to see this. This is back of, now this does create an opportunity to create a new back door or a formal back door to the school, but you really won't be able to see that unless even that, there's large pine trees and large vegetation by the front. Even as I travel down that road all the time, I'm not sure I have ever actually even noticed the back of the existing building. It's screened very well.
So what's the new building going to be?
What?
What is the use of the new building?
It's going to be gym, athletic areas, squash courts. Lee will get through. He'll walk you through the very detailed. Yeah. So,
okay.
But it's really,
'Cause I know.
it's wellness. Really tying together the whole campus. Right now, they do have an indoor gym, but it's dated, is what we would describe it as, and really that's what the. So there's the site plan, but I think I'd like to have Lee come up to get the real exciting stuff.
Is there anything on the ground now where that building's gonna be located?
It's all pavement. It's basically, there's a health center right here, a small health center. If you go by, it's about to come down. They're doing some asbestos abatement. But right now, this is the driveway coming through here, and they have parking fields all through here. So it's not green space today. I'd have to give you the number, but I would have to say probably 75% of that area that you're looking at is already pavement.
Oh, there we go.
Okay?
Nice.
Hi, I'm Lee Sherwood of Omar Architects, and it's really hard to tell anything from a site plan like that. It looks like a big blob that we've been on the campus. Hopefully we can make that a little more clear for you and see what's going on. this is a different, where's the best place for me to stand?
That's fine.
This is a different way of looking at it.
Yep.
We've been working with the school for about 3 years, really, in terms of doing a master plan, understanding their program. We work with independent schools. And this is a girls' school, so it was a very different kind of school, a different feeling there. And, have you all been on the campus? It's a beautiful place. And one of the things it has is the beautiful view and that big gym, that big solid gym right there that's kind of on the hill. When we first started looking at the idea of athletics on the campus, we looked all over the place. We looked down the hill, we looked at different places. But when we heard or felt that for the girls' school the idea was integration and wellness, wellness is different than just athletics. Wellness is part of your everyday life. So when we finally put the building in a way, if this is Beaverbrook right here, where the building starts to integrate with the rest of the school, then it becomes part of their everyday activity. So it was an inspired place to put it. We did a design that was actually quite a lot taller and bigger, and that went through the process of, oh my goodness, that's cost a lot of money, and that whole process. And actually, people are saying over the last few months that they really like this building. It's much more in scale. It has a different feel on the campus. It feels more like a better fit. So, just so you know, any of you who have been there, there's all these there's larger maple trees over here, and there's even a sugar grove. And we tried to keep that feel over here. This is where the hill falls away to the field, and there's these wonderful views. This is actually the south face. We're very sustainable. We're going to show you a lot of daylighting strategies and things like that. So if this is Beaverbrook, the intent was to connect to Beaverbrook, have galleries and places for the girls, have even a little student center gathering place right on the lawn side. They're going to put in gardens and things like that and make this a real lawn so that they can use it in a totally different place. I'm not even going to use the word quad because they don't talk like that over there. This is a lawn. This is a place to be. Then we put the larger piece, this is a good planning strategy, right in the middle, right here, and wrap it. You'll see it wrapped with the lower pieces. So you don't see that huge box, which is always a double gymnasium. Along this side, you'll see dance studios, and along underneath here, because the slope slopes down, and here it goes down like that, you're going to see a whole health center. So when they took down the building right here, that was part of the health center. The health center will be under here, and it'll actually be accessed from right. This goes down to this area, so an ambulance could even come right to the health center if a kid was hurt and had to be taken somewhere. And then we have what you'll see is a pool or an auditorium, some squash courts, fitness, and things like that. It's kind of nice when you come in this way, visitors would come in and they'd have their own entry right here. That connects pretty well. But the girls will probably come in and out of here all day long. Is that a pretty good orientation?
No, the athletic fields are down.
Yeah, they're
way
down here. So
Okay.
you're also going to see that there's a door here on the lower level that goes right to the health and to the lockers, right down to the fields. This, since we had a couple tries at it, this building's been pretty well planned. This is another way of looking at it in terms of floor plans. So you are seeing the upper level right here. So if I'm on the lawn side, where Beaverbrook is in the back, that's how you enter. When you come in, there's a lobby and it all connects to the student center. From up here, you can look down because this goes along like this and steps down. So here's a section through the lawn, through the gym, down through the pool and out. So you're up here, and here's Beaverbrook, and Beaverbrook's a pretty tall building, right? And you come along like this, and we connect nice and low, have a porch. Whoa, is that gonna really do that to me? Just twist it there. You'll have to help me out. There you go. Thank you.
You're an architect, not an engineer.
No,
That's why he brought me on.
I never pretended to be. So in terms of you have the gym, and then it steps down with the grade, and here's the natatorium in the new pool building. And by the time you get to here, it's the same height as the surrounding buildings right to the side of it. So if I were to take, this is the middle school building right over here, and it actually aligns right up with it. This building really just fits on campus. A couple of the other things, we really did spend a lot of time trying to understand service because the kitchens are here, and understanding how to make this kind of more of a European service court feel, you know, where you have a wall and a screen, but it's there, but it really is in the right place, and it's about as simple as you could make it. Right now, the service is actually right on the back of Beaverbrook, and it's just sprawling. So we've really consolidated and worked really hard with the mechanical engineers and everyone else to make it all work. So from up here, you'll have beautiful views. And down below, if you were to come down like this and enter, there's a little covered area. You can imagine the teams would come in on this lower level. Lots of girls coming in. There's a place to enter. There's the locker rooms below, or the team rooms, and the trainer, which goes to the fields. Here's the whole health center, right here. They even have little places, you know, for overnight stays and things like that. And here's the brand new natatorium, which is a real 8-lane swim opportunity, and 4 squash courts right here. So they can start to compete. They don't have squash, they don't have a pool right now. They can start to compete with other schools and have some good tournaments going on. Let me take off some of this heavy stuff. Let's start with this side. These are renderings that were done when we redesigned the building. So I think you've all seen this sort of view. This is the middle school right here along Sand Hill. If you look beyond, you see Beaverbrook coming up and all the other buildings. You can see a gate here to hold, you know, kind of a service area. So you come in, and you can see how the building steps. And what I'm telling you right now is that it lines up exactly with this right here, and it's about the same height as well. It's an interesting campus in terms of architecture. You have Beaverbrook, which has the big columns, and I'll show you a couple of pictures to remind you, and brick. And then some of these other buildings are kind of more 70s modern. They have the material, they have the scale, they have the proportion, but it's a different kind of aesthetic. And what we're trying to do with this building is do a contemporary building that fits and still has some of those elements that feel good, you know, create an environment. So there are columns here, and they are wood, but they're not Doric columns. They're more square columns that have nice detail to them. So they're a little more contemporary in that way. You know where the front door is, and you know where the door is on the other side. And then this becomes just a really nicely designed wall, you know, and it's not too tall. And what we're really doing is we're going to be growing some green wall on a portion of it. And then you'll see the panels, and then you'll get the light down, the natural light down into the pool area. And then the gymnasium will also get high clear story around with nice overhangs holding that in.
What material will be on those panels?
I knew you would ask. You're supposed to ask that. So what I was going to do is say, okay, so here's a gymnasium, day-lit, open, and here's an area where you walk inside and you look down into the pool and into the gymnasium, and there's light coming in, so it's all very connected. If I take this piece right here, let's see if this really works. I'll probably have to hold it because it's so heavy. Here we go.
Can we see it? Can we hold it?
Do you want to see it like there?
Yeah.
That's fine. Here. Here you go. So the photos that are right there are intended to say, this is the view from Sand Hill, and then this is the middle school right here, and we wanted to show you how there are actually a lot of different materials on the campus.
So what's rendered kind of brown in yours is what, brick?
So what we're using right here, we're using a terracotta smooth ground face block. So it has
This
a
one?
lot, right. No, down below.
This one.
A terracotta. So it's not, it's actually, it'll actually be scored square. So it's, again, bridging that feel of a little bit contemporary, but the exact same hue and the same feel and the warmth all through here. And then this right here is that concrete, right there is a concrete band right here, which might have maybe some stainless steel letters or something that say, Ethel Walker Centennial Center. And then as you go up, you'll have, so it feels very substantial here, and the grade is going down, and there'll be growies all along here, and it'll be nice. And then as you go up, the actual cornice is metal. And that is very similar to this building, and that's why we're showing you those pictures right there, where it's almost that same tripart, where you have the masonry, the slot of glass, and then the cap coming out and rubbing and protecting the sunlight. Then roof, and you're going to see it on the other side, where we have some of the lower roof, and that is meant to look, it's asphalt architectural, but it wants to be shingle in scale, slate scale. You've seen different kinds of those treatments. We just can't afford to have the slate that's on top of this building, but we want to be reminiscent of that and be respectful of that. So those are the basic materials. We are putting up screens, so if we do have some rooftop units, we're in construction drawings, so we're really figuring all this stuff out.
Do you guys have a CM or a contractor?
We have a CM, which is C.E. Floyd. C.E. Floyd, have you heard of them? They've done a number of independent schools. The school has hired them. And they have been working with us, doing estimates and doing constructability and all of those kinds of reviews. So we figured that you'd probably want to see this view first, and we can go back to it. But this is the side, this is the view of the, from the lawn, right here. So you've stood back here and you've seen Beaver Brook before, and what we're really doing is we're connecting to it, creating a porch-like sun room, almost like a stretched sun room that comes along. If you're standing inside of it, it has wood slat ceilings. You look into the gym. There's sun spaces off to the side. You can look and really be part of the green. And then here you come along, and this would be the whole gathering space with an area for light to come down. I don't think I can call it a cupola. It's more of a monitor. And one of the ideas here is if you can imagine, we've done studies of this at dusk, glowing at night, you can really see in, and the girls will be part of this side. So this side obviously really opens up, and you can see the purpose of that and engages. And then as this peels away, the base is that same masonry, and this is the student center, the health center, and that wraps around, and you see it along the other side. And its scale is complementary, but it does not compete with Beaver Brook. This is an interior showing this area right here, which is the gathering space. And when you come down this interior walk, you look right out and see the view. But here, this is the real view. If you go there and stand on the hill and walk around, I might as well just put a big pin here and say, this is the sweet spot on the whole campus. I can see the view, feel the sun. That is a place to put where the girls can congregate and hang out. And then lastly, we did have this as well, and since I gave you the other one, these are pictures. We're trying to, again, we're trying to fit in terms of material, scale, and proportion. And we're hiding equipment, and we care a lot about it really just fitting. And I think that they ended up getting all of the program that they really needed to be transformative. this building is that they haven't built a building like this in forever.
Yeah.
When was the last time they built a real building? This building is very, very important to the school, and they really feel like it will change everything.
You're definitely hiding a lot of equipment.
Yeah, and hopefully we're doing it.
Under the pool or?
Well, that's interesting. These plans have come a really long way. Here's the natatorium, and the pool, actually the pool equipment room's not that big anymore, but we put all the mechanical equipment on this interface right here, so it has really great, in that mechanical area. It's well laid out, I know, because we laid it out. But everything, so this is really simple. And then on the roof, there are rooftop units like this, but we are putting a nice screen on them, but we're pushing them back enough with the stepping that we feel like we screen them anyway. And also that'll help with noise. The other thing is that this roof will be set up so that it can have photovoltaic panels in the future. So the roof of this will be structured and electrical will be hooked up for that. Right now, though, it'll be a completely daylit space because it'll have the glass all the way around it. It's a pretty big project to get your head around. I've always felt like the renderings were the most revealing. And while they're not computer renderings right yet, from this scale and from this, they really haven't changed from this vision and this reality. I don't really know what your questions would be, but
It's an excellent presentation.
remember it was fighting it, but now it really steps with it and the scale comes naturally.
And that view is from the athletic field, right?
Yeah, so, well, if you're in the
Well, you'll be much lower. But you
Yeah, but
kind of
it's
look
that-
up that
Yeah,
hill.
you'd be
and-
way down here and you
Yeah.
come up.
So you can see, from the athletic field, you can see that.
Yes.
What you'll see is, peeking out from the big trees, you'll see this guy kind of up there on the side, right there. And it, and then.
Yeah, there is a wooded area that in between, but these things will kind of peek out. It won't be, in your face because there's some large trees. You have the homes down on Sand Hill, then there's a kind of a buffer of some large vegetation. So it'll be more peaked views from the athletic fields. Beaver Brook will still be your straight shot up is really Beaver Brook.
Okay.
Yeah, it is interesting not to fight with the building anymore, but I think that this will really feel porch-like and natural and be very much connected to the.
And Beaver Brook is the biggest building on campus, right?
It really is. It's been added on to, but it is a symmetrical, you can see that photo right there, that's from the front. And then the other one's from the back.
The view from,
I mean, on that side of campus, by far, that's the dominant building. The church chapel is a big, important, and then on the other side, the equestrian may be as big, but it's just not the same type of.
It's so amazing how ornate this is, even, with the white and all of that, and how different it feels back here. And I think that kind of coming off and attaching to it helps it ground a little bit.
Absolutely.
We wish, in my world, we would build all along here, but
When was that first built, Beaver Brook?
I don't remember.
Well, it's the centennial, right? So,
You know what, I think that
I think Beaver Brook was one of the first.
a piece of it was built, not all of it was built at once. And I think that this piece was built after, and then a lot of additions after that. Yes.
Speaking of additions, this is, has nothing to do with your addition. It's a beautiful project. But speaking of additions, it's the concrete, kind of like, it's on the south. It's right here. I like it so much. It's more like a brutalist, all concrete construction.
Oh, the Cluid dorm
That's how
on
it's
the
called.
end. The farthest one, it's kind of white.
The way I see it, it's behind the church, behind the
Yeah.
chapel.
Yes.
And you see it, it has 3 round posts and some sort of a walk on.
Well, that would be the library.
Is a
With the,
library?
it's a great
Okay.
space.
It is the
Okay.
It is a library with that
Okay.
kind of walkway
Yes,
through there.
yes. So that's a
virtually
library.
the highway for the girls in the morning, but
Okay.
that's a great space.
It is.
You know, the thing about it, the campus, I think, is missing 2 major components that would think this. Well, first of all, if you go around campus, girls are kind of like, they have to go to libraries where they want to get together. It's not the best place to go in and start
Yeah.
socializing. So this gives them, otherwise they're kind of down in the basement of Beaverbrook. The other thing is, the lawn spaces, you really have a public face on Bushy Hill, but it's really not an intimate back door. And by closing off that access drive through campus, I think this will become an extremely lively place in terms of that. But you think about the other dorms, they're kind of tucked in the woods. There's not really a lot of green space. Throw a frisbee, just have a little fun in the backyard. And by cutting off this road, we anticipate that will become this lively part of campus.
It will
Great.
change.
So as you see, this is all part of the same program. The fields were to get the school excited and potentially get some donors excited, and that worked out really well. The dorm got put online because the health center that's here, there's actually girls living in there. Once we realized we demoed that building, we had to get another dorm online, and that helped out on a couple things. And if you go out there today, I don't know if the building is still wrapped with some abatement, but that building's coming down. So this is,
It is.
and that's why Lee talked about for 3 years, he's been like really living and breathing. And this is really the culmination of that master plan.
That looks great.
Good have time.
Yep, we're out of time. But thank you very much. You did a great job. Looks beautiful. We have no comments for you, except,
You think that's an important board up there?
we just have,
We don't allow the public in here.
Thank you.
thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
We just need to approve some old meeting minutes. Does anybody have any comments on them?
No, I moved it. We
April,
approved
June,
the
July.
4 minutes.
4 minutes, great.
Second.
Thank you, all in favor?
Yes.
Approved, all meeting minutes are approved, and thank you, we will adjourn.
Yep.
Thanks, guys. Hiram, do you want me to, is this for zoning?
Yeah.